Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. So, breaking over the weekend, South Carolina had their primaries, and no real surprise that Donald Trump did win 20 points ahead of Nikki Haley. This graphic, according to the AP, shows that he topped out with 99% reporting 59.8% of the votes compared to Nikki Haley at 39.5%. But should that 59% still concern the Republicans? Joining me now is Marc Lotter, who's the Chief Communications Director for the AFPI, which is the America First Policy Institute. So, Marc, heading out of South Carolina, going into Super Tuesday next week, what is this looking like for Donald Trump, still sitting at under 60%?
Well, I think we have to look at this in the broader context. I've seen the exit polling that shows about 40%, nearly half of Nikki Haley's support came from liberal and moderates who had no intention of voting for the Republican nominee in the general election. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, Nikki's been getting money from Democrats. She's messaging to Democrats. She's encouraging Democrats and liberals and liberal moderates to come out and support her campaign. So when we get to a general election matchup, I have no concern that Donald Trump will unify the party and move on forward.
That's a really fascinating point, that a lot of this 39% are probably liberals and leftists that are voting for Nikki Haley when they're not going to vote Republican in a general election, because that's what's concerning, I think, to a lot of Republicans, with the question mark of whether Donald Trump can unify the party. And this coming as just this morning, Ronna McDaniel officially announced her resignation. Let's put up that headline now. She has officially announced her resignation, this according to Trending Politics. And so as she officially resigns ahead of Super Tuesday, how does the RNC's funding, with especially the ongoing litigation that Donald Trump is still having to fundraise for, how does that factor into a general election analysis?
Well, I think it's great news that that we're getting a change in leadership at the RNC, and it's not unusual once you have a presumptive nominee for there to be a blending between the National Party and that campaign, because you're all united moving forward. Having a top campaign strategist in Chris LaCivita moving over to do day-to-day operations at the RNC, he's brilliant at this. He knows how to do get out the vote. He knows how to do ballot chasing and absentee mail-in ballots. So that is a perfect guy to be leading the day-to-day operations. They'll get a chair and a vice chair named, and that's mostly from a fundraising standpoint. So I have no doubt that as the party unites behind Donald Trump, you'll also see a lot of money that was sitting on the sidelines start to come into the RNC as we build out that machine, which is really handled at the state and local level. But that machine will then move forward in their get out the vote efforts, their ballot harvesting, their early vote efforts, and really helping candidates up and down the ballot.
And that's a really important factor heading into a presidential election year, is to not forget all of the down ticket races as well. And so for AFPI, which is very concerned about policy and, of course, presidential transition, if in fact Donald Trump does win again in November, he is the presumptive candidate right now. So we're assuming that he'll still be on the ballot, and he should, depending on what the Supreme Court ultimately holds with the presidential immunity cases, as well as the Colorado ballot issue and that 14th Amendment question. But in terms of policy, we know that the border issue is a huge one. There was a tweet from Elon Musk just earlier today, Marc Lotter, that was a CNN piece on January 20th of 2021 that is still up when Biden first took office, that talked about how he was reversing Donald Trump's border policies. And we saw that in the wake of, unfortunately, this tragic murder of a young nursing student by an illegal alien. And the mainstream media just doesn't want to talk about that. But I think even moderates and independents, from a policy perspective, are going to want to focus on America First policies heading into 2024, from the presidential race all the way to state and local level.
No, you're absolutely right. It's because the policies work. They work on the economy, they work for energy, and they definitely work on immigration. It can never be forgotten that Joe Biden took 94 executive actions in his first 100 days in office to undo all the border security measures that were put in place under Donald Trump. And now we've seen another example of the tragedy that is taking on that family in Georgia, really the Georgia community. This is a young woman who was out for a run and was killed, allegedly, allegedly by an illegal immigrant who came in through Texas in 2022, was arrested a year later and released because of liberal soft on crime policies. And now here we go. You have this horrible, tragic murder that takes place. And we can be seeing this happening in any community across America. And it really underscores the point for me when the number one issue in the Iowa caucuses was immigration. Iowa doesn't border anything. But the number one issue in New Hampshire, which has a small border with Canada, immigration. The number one issue this past weekend in South Carolina, immigration. It shows you what a problem it is that was created by Joe Biden. And really everybody knows he doesn't have any plan to change it. Even though he's going to the border later this week, it's probably just going to be all cleaned up, sanitized, and basically it's just going to be a photo op.
Yeah, and what happened to Kamala Harris? I thought she was kind of the border czar, but the Babylon Bee headline was just that Joe Biden goes to On the Border, the Mexican restaurant, to find out what everybody's talking about. I think that's the only thing that he cares about in terms of the border. And so it's going to be really fascinating to see what kind of photo op and what kind of manipulation of the headlines is going to come out from the Democrats. Donald Trump is also heading to the border this week. What do you expect from his, not just photo op, but I expect probably some very, very strong policy analysis.
Absolutely. And, the former President Trump is actually going to Eagle Pass, Texas, which is really ground zero for where the crisis is taking place. He's not going to Brownsville, Texas. And so, Donald Trump knows how to get this done. He's already done it once before. And it's not just the wall. It's Remain in Mexico. It's taking away all of the things and the freebies that Democrats, whether it's Joe Biden or Gavin Newsom or Mayor Adams in New York, are offering to these migrants, which attracts more illegal migration. We need to send them back to where they came from, not provide them a goodie bag that says, please come on in here, be illegal in America. It's great. We'll give you free stuff.
Right. There should be incentives that you stay in your country, you follow the law, or you at least assimilate and come across the border according to American law. So, Marc Lotter from the America First Policy Institute, always appreciate your analysis. And it'll be interesting to see if the GOP does ultimately rally behind Donald Trump and what his campaign will do to unite the Republican Party. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America Coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. As America races toward November and 2024 elections, all the way from presidential races down ticket, abortion still remains a hot topic and very controversial, particularly following the Alabama Supreme Court decision last week, which did recognize fertilized embryos as children under the law. This tweet, coming from Josh Hammer, who is an attorney and legal commentator, said, because of the holding and colorful concurrence, leftists have denounced LePage, which was the title of this case, as an imperious act of quote unquote theocracy or Christian nationalism. Nothing could be further from the truth. This is not theocracy. It is basic historical and legal literacy. Joining me now to discuss is Walker Wildmon, who is the Vice President at the American Family Association and also the host of At the Core on American Family Radio Network, where I host Jenna Ellis in the morning. So, Walker, I think Josh is absolutely right that the leftists are trying to frame this as some kind of novel theory under the law, when really the Alabama Supreme Court was simply following its a statute that has been on the books for years and recognizing that it doesn't matter what stage of development a human being is at. Everyone is a human being and made in the image of God, has inherent dignity and worth, whether it is at the stage of an embryo or it's all the way at the late stage of human life. And so when we're dealing with the leftists calling this a theocracy or saying, well, you're just trying to push your morality on us by suggesting that all human beings have a right to life, that I think really misses the point of this important ruling.
Yeah, the conservative position on the pro-life issue has been the same for decades, if not centuries, and that is human life begins at conception and should be protected from conception to natural death. So that is the standard, if you will, and all this ruling did in Alabama was affirm that position, right? And so this is not novel legal theory or some new avenue that conservatives are taking in the pro-life movement. This has been around for a long time, and all the personhood amendments that various pro-lifers did in various states around the country in recent decades are all in furtherance of this narrative and this truth that life begins at conception. So this isn't new. It's not a new phenomena, and it isn't a threat to IVF procedures. It's zero threat to IVF procedures. All the ruling states is that you cannot discard babies, embryos, without cause, without just care. So this is a very important ruling, and the pro-life movement has to be on the up and up and educated on this topic.
Absolutely. And what's so important about recognizing that we can, as conservative Christians, advance the pro-life truth that life begins at conception and has inherent dignity and a legal protection, a right to life all the way until natural death, is not trying to advance some sort of theocracy. We're not talking about the church over the state and pastors informing governors and presidents what they must do in that chain of authority. We're talking about two different spheres of government, the civil government and the church government, but both should be informed by natural law and the basic truth of reality. And so this leftist claim that it's only the Christians that are forcing their worldview on a secular society, I think really misses the point that pro-abortion advocates and pro-choice activists, they're forcing and trying to force their worldview on law just as much.
Yeah, this is science 101. I mean, this is not just about Christianity and the Bible. This is anyone who submits themselves to science would understand that these embryos, these precious embryos, should you continue the entire paternal stages of pregnancy, it's going to be a child. It is a child, and it will be born, and it will look like you and me. So that's the reality here. I think our country's having a hard time coming to grips to the fact that we have been treating babies like objects, and we've been purchasing and discarding them like they're some consumer object, and it's a tragedy. So the truth is that the embryos are babies, and they can't be discarded like this, like they've been done through many of these IVF procedures. So this is an issue that we're going to have to address as a country, morally, scientifically, and the Alabama Supreme Court ruling is a step in the right direction in recognizing the personhood of these embryos.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you mentioned, Walker, this is not about some kind of novel, just religious concept. This is about following the science. And I thought the leftists prided themselves on saying that they would follow the science. But yet, when it's convenient for them, they want to ignore the fact that life does begin at conception. We can prove that scientifically. And it's always a human being. There's never a pregnant woman that wonders, well, am I going to have a baby dinosaur? Am I going to have a vegetable? I mean, it's always a human life, and we know that scientifically. And yet, the leftists want to negate the science. They want to ignore that when they want to commoditize children and they want the cultural convenience of abortion. And so moving ahead into 2024, how important of a topic do you think this should be for the Republican Party and conservatives overall to not shy away from the truth of pro-life?
Yeah, I think we have to do a better job educating the American populace and the Republican Party and the conservative movement on this issue. I mean, specifically, all of the misinformation on this IVF ruling out of Alabama is par for the course for the Republican Party. I mean, President Trump put out a tweet basically fulfilling the narrative of the left that IVF is at threat, and it's completely not. All the ruling stated was that the embryos are babies and they have to be cared for accordingly and legally according to Alabama state statute. So this is a victory for the pro-life movement, the recognition of embryos being persons, and they have to be treated and protecting accordingly. The IVF procedure is not at threat in Alabama. You can still have an IVF done as a couple and as a mother, as a wannabe mother. So this is a very pro-life ruling. And the entire IVF procedure is 100% operational in Alabama. It's just that the clinics have to protect the embryos instead of discard them as if they're not persons.
Right, and this case stemmed out of the mismanagement and lack of due care by a fertility clinic that was housing these embryos. And so, under the Alabama statute for wrongful death of a child, the Alabama Supreme Court simply followed their own law that has been on the books. And I think there's a lot of hysteria that is going on, Walker, that the IVF procedure or in vitro fertilization for infertile couples or even for commoditizing children. I have a real moral problem, frankly, with women who intentionally create fatherless children. But those types of procedures that wasn't contemplated in this case. But we're going to talk more about the rights to the child with Katy Faust, my next guest, coming up right after this. As you know, my friend Mike Lindell has a passion to help everyone get the best sleep of their life. He didn't stop by simply creating the best pillow. Mike created the Giza Dream bed sheets. They look and feel great, which means an even better night's sleep for me, which is crucial for my busy schedule. Mike found the world's best cotton. It is ultra soft and breathable, but extremely durable. Mike's Giza sheets come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. The Giza Dream Sheets come in a variety of sizes and colors. Mike's latest incredible deal is the sale of the year. For a limited time, you will receive 50% off the Giza Dream Sheets. You will also receive a set for as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and use the promo code Jenna. There you will find not only this amazing offer, but also deep discounts on all MyPillow products, including the MyPillow 2.0 mattress topper, which I have and I love, the MyPillow kitchen towel sets, and now even flannel sheets and so much more. We definitely need flannel sheets for as crazy as all of this weather has been lately. So go to mypillow.com and make sure you use the promo code Jenna or call 1-800-564-8475. That's 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna. So as this Alabama Supreme Court ruling continues to make headlines and the concern from leftists are much more about abortion and pro-choice and the rights of the mother over the rights of the child, independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. tweeted this. He said, Republicans like Tommy Tuberville should stop imposing their abortion absolutism on medical issues like IVF. Countless women have IVF to thank for their babies. Every child is a blessing. I wholeheartedly reject the Alabama ruling on this issue. Most Republicans I speak to are sick of this political theater. Let's get back to working for the needs of the American people. So joining me now to discuss is Katy Faust. She is the founder of Them Before Us and talks about the rights of children. Where is this in his tweet? Of course, every child is a blessing, but the rights of the child, that's not political theater. That's actually a moral decision on behalf of the nation.
Yeah, well, he's exactly right. Every child is a blessing. And that's exactly why we reject IVF in almost every situation. because IVF is responsible for the loss of more little embryonic lives than Planned Parenthood is every year. The thing about IVF is it's not just about infertile people having babies. It is a process largely built on grading, selecting, discarding babies that are unwanted, undesirable, that have the wrong hair color, who are the wrong sex, who are deemed not as viable, or maybe just don't make the grade the way the rest of their embryonic siblings do. And as a result, we've got about 93% of lab-made babies that will never see life on this side of the womb. Really, this is not about babies. This is about on-demand designer babies. And that is why we, as a children's rights nonprofit, come out very hard against IVF.
And the Alabama Supreme Court ruling, of course, didn't comment specifically on IVF in terms of its legality, but I think you're absolutely correct, Katy, that there are so many moral issues with IVF being used to commoditize children, and no one is talking about the rights of children. There are so many women who are choosing to create children with a sperm donor and intentionally bringing children into the world that are fatherless. And as your book rightly points out, children have a right to their biological father and mother.
Yep. So big fertility really is an industry. We're not talking about a benevolent nonprofit. This is not organizations set up to help children and protect their rights and well-being. This is a marketplace. That's really what it is. It is the commodification of human life. It is the designing, disposing, donating to research, little lives, all based on the desires of adults. Big fertility violates the rights of children in a variety of ways. Number one, it violates their right to life. Right now, the baby taking industry is, because we have dehumanized children through this process, their business model is built on discarding unwanted life. And that's why you see fertility doctors, both after the Dobbs decision came down, but now after this Alabama court decision came out, talking about how we can't practice IVF in Alabama anymore. And it's because their business model is built on creating so many more embryos than they ever would intend to implant, grading them, selecting them, implanting a few, discarding the rest, storing many in a freezer forever. I mean, honestly, I've tweeted, if your business model is built on the dehumanization of little lives, you probably should reconsider your business model. So children's right to life is impacted. And then, like you said, many of the children that are born alive are going to be intentionally severed from a biological mother or father. That is going to put them at drastically increased risk of identity issues, unstable and more unsafe homes. And very often, like you said, they're going to be starved of the maternal or paternal love that children need every day. So this industry is not one that is thinking about and supportive of or accommodating to the rights and well-being of children. It is absolutely in service to the desires of adults, regardless of how little lives are impacted.
And Katy Faust, I think that so many even conservatives who contemplate the issue of IVF are not thinking of it in these terms. They think of it mostly in the moral way that IVF is helping an infertile couple, and those things that we would support and we would say are good uses of advances of medical technology. But what you're describing here is a horrific process that really is commoditizing children. And so the Republican Party really on the issue of abortion has backed way off, unfortunately. And even on issues like IVF, a lot of the conservative candidates don't really want to touch this issue because it seems like if you come out against IVF as a whole, then you're suggesting to couples that would use this technology in a good way, well, we just don't care that you're dealing with fertility issues. We don't want to allow you this type of access that you should be able to choose for yourself. So where is the line here that conservatives truly should draw from a truth and science-based perspective?
Well, we've got the same problem on this topic as we do with every other marriage and family topic, which is obsessively focusing on what adults want to the absolute detriment of children. And I understand that there's people on our side who are going to be triggered by the idea that children are people deserving of human rights from the moment of conception. And that actually makes demands on all of us. And, we've had high critiques for people like Pete Buttigieg and others who have created intentionally motherless children. And we say, hey, how dare you do that to a child? But then it comes over to people on our side and we go, maybe it's not that bad. And you know what? That's honestly the kind of moral waffling that will lose us the next generation. We need strong, convicted, courageous people who are speaking clearly on behalf of the most vulnerable. We actually do have one of the greatest human rights crises taking place right now under this for-profit business. We've got 1.5 million little lives on ice in this country, maybe 20 to 40% that have been functionally abandoned. And we are monetizing, designing, and discarding a vast majority of these little lives. So are we pro-life or not? Are we going to only advance these kinds of human rights issues when it advances our own self-interest? Or are we really going to stand on behalf of the most vulnerable and fight, no matter what industry is doing the violating, whether it is the baby taking industry of abortion or the baby making industry of IVF? And I say, it's time for us to say, we need to put them before us. We need to put kids before adults. And it's up to you and it's up to me to do that. And you know what? There's even some leaders in the Republican Party that need this kind of education.
Absolutely. So well said. And, it's really easy to stand on principle when it suits you and when it's convenient. It's when it's inconvenient and it's more difficult that it shows what you truly believe. And I've started calling this moral gerrymandering, where the Republican Party is just as guilty as the Democrats of wanting to redraw the bright lines of moral truth and boundaries to just carve out our own particular policy issues that we would like to participate in. And that's where the Republican Party, if they're truly conservative, needs to stand firm on truth, on science, on policy, and make sure that we are pro-life, we are pro-free political rights, we are pro-constitution, even when it means that we don't necessarily get what we want, or we may not even win at the Supreme Court on certain issues. That's what it means to be a conservative. We'll be right back with more. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com, and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. Artificial intelligence is once again causing concern for conservatives and truth tellers, and it should be for fact checkers. Google's Gemini, which is the artificial intelligence tool, caused a lot of headlines over the weekend because Gemini was creating these images based on artificial intelligence inputs that were asking for creation of images of actual historical figures. But this, coming from Axios in this headline, is saying that Google paused the AI image generation after diversity controversies. Google has stopped allowing users to generate images of humans with its Gemini AI tool after people complained that it produced pictures of Black founding fathers, a female pope, and gay couples when you asked it to create images of straight couples. So joining me now is Jake Denton, who is the tech reporter for the Heritage Foundation. And Jake, this is really concerning, but Google suggested that it was pausing Gemini because this was a breakdown in its algorithm. This was something that was unexpected, but I think actually it was acting exactly according to what Google wanted. Google didn't anticipate that people would be outraged based on the truth.
That's right. This comes after years of Google doing all sorts of different content moderation policies to make sure that this type of thing happens, whether it be in image search results or on platforms like YouTube that they also own. But I think this is a much more cut and dry experience. You ask it to generate a photo of a white family and it can't do that for you. It's very jarring for the consumer. And so it kind of caused a reaction amongst the average user that I don't think they really anticipated. And so you're absolutely right. This is by design. This was obviously intentional. They wanted it to work this way, and they just really didn't expect the reaction to be like this.
Yeah. So, what is the real danger then of AI when you have a company like Google that, of course, in its algorithm can push certain stories up to the top of search engines and basically create a narrative that people are believing? Because a lot of people assume that when you put a search into a tool like Google, that you just get some of the response that doesn't have an inherent bias, and they have been shaping the narrative and the story with their search results for decades. And now this is just finally coming more and more to the surface when we see a tool like Gemini that is clearly antithetical to reality.
Yeah, well, these kind of strange outputs that you receive from Google Gemini were a byproduct of its trust and safety policies that exist across all of their various products and carry a very similar message about various social justice issues. And so the really interesting thing here is that Google Gemini clearly is an inferior product to things like ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude. You have Mistral in France, which is another competitor, and they've thrown stacks of cash at this. So it's not simply enough to just decommission this. And honestly, they might not really be able to overcome these types of implicit biases that they've built the system on. So what's likely to happen is that it finds itself in Google search, in YouTube, as some sort of sub tool. And so there's a ripple effect here that, a dying failed product that they potentially can't salvage might find its way into legacy products and impact the, search results that you noted have always been skewed to an even more severe degree.
And Elon Musk has suggested that he's going to try to combat some of this search engine problem with an X search engine. He's already created an AI tool called Grok that has more of a bias toward truth, if you will. I mean, it is programmed. And so he seems to be very concerned that artificial intelligence accurately reflects reality. But it seems like a lot of our lawmakers on Capitol Hill aren't as concerned about AI.
Well, I don't know if it's that they're not concerned about AI. I think they have no idea where to start, right? I mean, this is a very broad topic that they just simply have neglected for far too long, and now they're trying to play catch up, and it's very disorienting. We haven't even necessarily settled on a legislative definition for artificial intelligence, as our lawmakers are trying to debate how to solve for this type of Google censorship, right? So I think we'll eventually catch up. It's just a question of how bad things get before we get there.
And the Supreme Court is contemplating a censorship case on social media platforms that deals a lot with big tech and the rise of bias. This is what Governor Ron DeSantis had to say about the Supreme Court case that was argued this morning.
Supreme Court's going to hear argument this morning about whether big tech has a right to censor you for political speech that it disagrees with. Florida passed protections 3 years ago for individuals who've been deplatformed or censored based on the content or viewpoint of their political speech. Texas passed a similar law. This has been waking its way through the courts. We knew it was going to end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. This is a really important issue. These tech companies, on the one hand, are private, and normally a private company can house whatever speech or viewpoints it wants. In this case, these companies get liability protection from the federal government because they say that they're not publishers. They're not making editorial judgments about what speech is good and what speech is bad. They're just a platform. And so they shouldn't be held liable for anything that somebody puts on there. Well, you can't have your cake and eat it too.
So, Jake Denton, as we're seeing the Supreme Court already dealing with censorship questions, how likely is it that the Supreme Court in forthcoming years is going to have to deal with some kind of AI litigation as well?
Yeah, well, today's case is really centered around viewpoint discrimination and access to these critical systems. There was even a moment where they essentially proved that Gmail could deplatform Tucker Carlson or Rachel Maddow from their email service based off of their, viewpoints. And so as these systems integrate into the corporate landscape and they are used for, really critical services, there will naturally be viewpoint-related issues that arise. And these trust and safety limitations that these systems are imposing will limit the ability of, maybe a controversial organization or individual to get that output. And so it's a very similar fact pattern, a little more modern, a little more kind of futuristic maybe, but it's something that is naturally going to occur. And, the Supreme Court is going to increasingly be tasked with these types of cases as states legislate in advance of federal government, because our federal lawmakers, as we discussed, can't figure this out. So they're not just going to let it keep going on.
So do you think that the Supreme Court's composition of, frankly, older justices and some of these judges on the federal level are equipped to handle this kind of controversy?
It's tough to say because they haven't been stress tested to a degree where we can really see if they're up to speed necessarily on issues like artificial intelligence. But there is absolutely an age issue here, right? Where it is a very complex issue. And if you haven't personally played around with ChatGPT or Google's Gemini and seen these kind of trust and safety limitations, you have no idea what people are talking about when you're presented with this information. So, whether they're prepared or not, it really doesn't matter. They're going to have to figure out how to rule on these types of cases.
Yeah, well, let's hope that, Justice Roberts and Justice Scalia are playing around with ChatGPT and see the biases in Gemini, and we're playing around with Grok maybe in Chambers. But we'll see how all of these cases shape up. And this is why it's so important to have good judges on the bench. So we'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Well, thanks so much for joining us on this very first episode of Jenna Ellis Tonight. This show is going to replace SNC Tonight on the Salem News Channel, and also will be the Jenna Ellis Show on my podcast, which you can find on all of the streaming platforms, including the JennaEllisShow.com. So I'm very excited to be the permanent host of the 9 p.m. Eastern hour on the Salem News Channel to bring you the top trending headlines and analysis from a conservative worldview perspective. A conservative means that we're conserving truth. We're conserving the natural law. We are conserving the U.S. Constitution, which recognizes, by virtue of our Declaration, that our rights are pre-political and that the sole legitimate purpose of government is to preserve and to protect the rights that come from God, our Creator, not our government. So when we look at the news of the day, this isn't just about Republican versus Democrat. It's not about siloed partisan policy. It's not to say that Republicans can do no wrong and we have to support everything that the Republican Party platform stands for, or that Democrats are always bad. What we should be doing as conservatives is to conserve truth. We need to call out a false worldview or a false view or interpretation of the Constitution wherever it is, regardless of the party or the politician. So what I will do each and every hour on weekdays, and you can find Jenna Ellis Tonight here on the Salem News Channel every weekday at 9 p.m. Eastern, is to take the top trending headlines and to talk about them from a truth-based perspective, not a partisan perspective. We've gotten so off as a society by being so siloed and identifying in red versus blue, rather than rightly dividing truth from error and recognizing that our worldview has to be premised in objective reality. When we're talking about moral law driving our policy decisions, it's not about me as a Christian forcing my religious beliefs onto society. It's about understanding that the law inherently is moral. What our society prohibits, what it criminalizes, what it permits, and what it incentivizes are all based on someone's morality. So is it objective truth of the laws of nature and of nature's God as our founders intended? Or is it going to be just a collective of whoever happens to be the majority of the U.S. Supreme Court's 9 justices? Or even a majority of the current House of Representatives and the Senate, or of the president with his phone and his pen, like Obama used to say. No, then we would be a nation of tyrants. We are a nation of rules, not of rulers. It's not about whatever is the top trending perspective of society that can ebb and flow and change with the times. You've probably heard that a lot of the leftists say that our U.S. Constitution is fluid and that it can bend and shape to the will of society, whatever the given issue is of our culture today. If we go with that theory, then we are completely losing our grounding and our mooring in objective truth. We do have inherent limits as a civil government and civil law. So, for example, the House of Representatives couldn't just get together in a Republican majority and say, you know what would be really good for American society? We want to repeal the law of gravity because we would just love to allow everyone to fly. We would all laugh at that because it's so absurd. We recognize that civil law and civil government has inherent limits. There are simply things that human beings do not have the power, the capacity, or the ability to self-determine, to reinvent, or to change. But that's exactly what the progressive leftists are trying to do. They are trying to reinvent reality according to their own terms and go against the laws of nature and of nature's God. So when we look at our top trending headlines, they may not fit very neatly into the civil law, the church government, or the family government, which are the three institutions that God ordained that are pre-political: legitimate government, law in a society, and truth in society, which is really the best definition of politics. It's truth in community. All of those things are ultimately under the authority of the reality to which we are presented. We need to, as conservatives, get back to understanding this reality that we are presented to, understand how the laws of nature work, and then we need to apply them from an objective moral standpoint. I talked about moral gerrymandering. That's exactly what a lot of Republicans and even so-called conservatives would like to do. They'd like to redraw the moral boundaries and guidelines to carve out their particular activity. If we want to redefine marriage, for example, as between two men or two women, they'd like to carve that out rather than understanding natural law has said throughout human history that marriage is between one man and one woman, and it's actually a religious institution. But the Republican Party wants to carve that out. They would also like to suggest that maybe the trans agenda is okay, that men can become women or women can become men, and we need to have those protections under so-called civil rights in society. There is nothing natural about that. It is completely unnatural. And so when we are advocating for policy and for truth, we have to go back to a moral bright line standard that we can defend that is a cohesive worldview. If you look at the left or even Republicans who are picking and choosing what types of views they would like to prefer in policy, and it's kind of this smorgasbord of policy worldview that's like buffet style, that's not a cohesive, coherent worldview, all they're doing is trying to carve out one or two things that they disagree with that they wish were different. Reality, you may not like that the law of gravity is self-enforcing, it's self-existing, it's also self-explanatory, and mankind simply discovered it. They understand how it works in reality, and we have to negotiate with it. But we can't redefine it. We can't change it. Human beings simply don't have that capacity. So this show is much, much more about the truth of reality, and it's about so much more than just Republican versus Democrat or a lot of these bickering sort of tweets that you see on social media. What we want to get to is the heart of the issue and the root of what this policy, this headline, or these really difficult concepts like IVF or artificial intelligence, what that says about a society that is going to have to legislate around this. What should we permit in a society? Does should depend on what just the majority of us believe? Or is should all about legitimacy and the inherent dignity of human beings that are set apart in God's creation as the highest order, but are still under the authority of natural law? When we look at the U.S. Constitution, when we look at the limited specific powers of government that our founders provided to the Constitution, we can see a brilliant framework that we can still consistently be conservatives without allowing the petty, petty tyrants to take over. So I'm looking forward to joining you each and every night here on the Salem News Channel and also on my podcast. Please click that subscribe button at thejennaellisshow.com. And of course, you can always reach me on social media across all platforms at Jenna Ellis ESQ.